On August 6, 1945, the tragic bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki ended World War II for the Japanese, exposing the nation to the horrors of atomic weaponry. 200,000 people were killed, some instantaneously from the blast, while others suffered a painful death from radiation poisoning. The period following the atomic bombing of Japan was an era of political and cultural transformation. There was confusion about Japan's national and cultural identity during occupation. However, Japanese filmmaker Ishiro Honda's movie Gojira highlighted the new global threat of nuclear weaponry. The movie's soft power triumph transformed Japan and America's relationship, reforged a new, distinctively Japanese cultural identity, and accelerated the Japanese economic miracle, while serving as an expression of the tragedy of the atomic bomb. In the aftermath of Japan's unconditional surrender, not only did the Japanese have to address the significant physical destruction of its cities, but they also had to endure foreign occupation, the dismantling of their military, a drastic revision of their constitution, and the demotion of their emperor from the status of deity to that of a mere figurehead. Without a ruler to guide them through the tragedy of war, the Japanese people were confused as to where their national identity was. Emperor Hirohito encouraged his country to work to keep up with the rest of the world on a news broadcast in which he stated,
東京を思い、総力を将来の建設に傾け、道義を厚くし、思想を固くし、誓って国体の成果を発揚し、世界の信用に遅れざらんことを基礎べし、何時信任、それ、よく親愛を大せよ。
During occupation by the United States from 1945 to 1952, Japan looked towards America as a model for rebuilding their country. This period was known as the recovery stage of the Japanese economic miracle, in which Japan rapidly began the road to becoming the world's second largest economy after the United States. While the mimicry of American culture and institutions proved successful, this resulted in the tragedy of a heavy loss of traditional Japanese culture. At the time, many critics voiced fears that Japan was becoming an American imitation and tradition began to fade. Around the time Hiroshima and Nagasaki was bombed, an aspiring filmmaker known as Ishiro Honda was creating movies at Toho Studios. His experiences from World War II left him with severe post-traumatic stress disorder and compelled him to create a film about his experiences. Honda drew inspiration from many sources, including The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, an American film about a giant dinosaur that took over New York. Honda also drew inspiration from the tragic horrors of the atomic age, and particularly what was to be called the Lucky Dragon incident, in which the crew of the fishing sampan the Daigo Fukuryumaru was exposed to large amounts of nuclear fallout near Bikini Atoll, America's largest nuclear test site. Both the crew and the fish became poisoned, and upon return, the sickness spread amongst the general public, giving Japan a fresh reminder of the dangers of atomic fallout. The poisoned fish made many people sick and resulted in the loss of thousands of dollars worth in seafood. Inspired by both the movie and the Lucky Dragon incident, Honda began to develop Project G, an unnamed monster movie in the works. Many ideas were tossed around, but the production team settled on the name Gojira, a compound word of two terms, Kujira, meaning whale, and gorilla. The film featured a prehistoric monster which slept in the depths of Tokyo Bay. Awakened and angered by atomic radiation, Gojira rampaged through Tokyo, destroying everything in its wake. At the time, Gojira was intended to be a thoughtful commentary on Japan's recent struggles and difficulties, as it attempted to deal with the often destructive inclinations of governments, both foreign and domestic, and the new global threat of nuclear weaponry. In the movie, Gojira rampages through Tokyo every night and returns to the bay later to rest. With the general public in a state of panic, Dr. Serizawa, a reclusive nuclear physicist, decides to take matters into his own hands with the oxygen destroyer, a bomb said to be 10 times more powerful than the ones dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Ashamed of his creation, and terrified of the consequences it were to have if it were to fall into the wrong hands, Serizawa takes the blueprints with him and kills himself along with the beast. By shaping the plot around Gojira and the dangers of powerful weapons, Ishiro Honda was able to highlight the fears and dangerous consequences of nuclear war. In Japan's domestic market, Gojira received mixed reviews during its initial run, making a total of 183 million yen. In the Tokyo Journal, Honda recalled that critics stated that Gojira was absurd because such giant monsters don't exist. Others said that depicting a fire-breathing organism was strange. Honda expressed his disappointment at this general reception, claiming that critics called it grotesque junk and said that it looked like something you'd spit up. I felt sorry for my crew, because they had worked so hard. However, there were a few people who did enjoy the movie. Haruo Nakajima, the actor who played Gojira, claimed that he went to several of the movie showings in theaters and sat backwards in the front row so he could enjoy the reactions of the audience. He also noted that some of the audience members cried when they recalled the terrible incidents of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
だから最後まで僕のゴジラってのはフィルムに残ってますからね。記録に残ってるからね、僕らはありがたいと思う。
A few years later, Gojira played in American cinemas under a new name, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Although most of the movie was kept intact, all scenes of the Japanese military were ultimately cut. In order to replace the gaps in footage, the American studios added a new character played by Canadian actor Raymond Burr. Additionally, horrible English subtitles were added due to a lack of translators. This American version, albeit dubbed and censored, was well received by American watchers and became a popular film among young children. Mark Umbrello, a professor of history at the University of Hawaii, stated in an interview that it says a lot about the way in which national histories take shape. Governments have mechanisms to guarantee their people see what they want them to see. Those who released the American version took into consideration what they thought their audiences would be comfortable seeing. One of the major changes in the story involved the repositioning of the narrative to a more American-centered perspective, with the introduction of Raymond Burr as the foreign journalist covering the story. Soon after the huge success of the Americanized remake, it was retranslated to Japanese and distributed to Japanese cinemas, and was met with a more positive reception than the original 1954 release. While the original anti-nuclear message in Gojira was somewhat obscured in the Americanized version, it was able to create a genre of movies that both the US and Japan could enjoy. Ishiro Honda commented years later saying that the first film critics to appreciate Gojira were those in the US when Godzilla was released there as Godzilla, King of the Monsters in 1956. The critics said such things as, "From the start, this film frankly depicts the horrors of the atomic bomb." By these evaluations, the assessment began to impact critics in Japan and has changed their opinions over the years. The movie became a triumph that simultaneously rebuilt connections between Japan and America, accelerated the Japanese economic miracle, and reforged a new distinctly Japanese cultural identity, while serving as an expression of the tragedy of the atomic bomb. By touching the hearts of millions of Japanese and American peoples around the world, Gojira served as a multicultural icon and foundation for future movies while supporting Japan culturally, socially, and economically. This soft power approach would later transform the Japanese and American relationship in the oncoming years. Soon after Godzilla was made, there was a higher demand for kaiju, or great beast films. However, audiences wanted monster fights of epic proportions rather than the darker themes of Honda's original. Studio Toho immediately responded to Japan's cravings for monster movies like Gojira and Godzilla. Gojira became the pioneer of Japan's kaiju revolution, an era of films which depicted beasts of epic scale destroying or defending cities. Some famous kaiju which spawned in this era included Mothra, Gojira, and King Ghidorah, all prehistoric mutations that were major successes in Japan. Many of these kaiju were also successful in America. Gojira, for example, was released in the US in 1965. While these movies weren't particularly historical, it gave many people something to appreciate and to talk about. While the kaiju revolution was a triumph because it opened up monster movies for a wider audience, it did so with a cost, an amnesia with regards to the original historical message about the dangers and consequences of war. While Godzilla inspired masses of people, it also reunited Japan with the outside world. By creating this multicultural icon, Godzilla was able to reunify Japan with America, and all the bitter feelings of World War II were replaced with a mutual love of film. Kaiju movies played a large part in Japan's economic rebound during the post-war era and played a key role in Japan's economic miracle. Since the release of the film, Toho has adopted the moniker King of the Monsters for Godzilla, which has since appeared in official marketing, advertisement, and promotional material. Gojira's legacy has paved the way for a new genre of film and has served as a bridge between cultures. Godzilla continued its rampage through Japan, making 34 additional movies from the original studio and 4 American-directed reboots and sequels. Godzilla also spawned a few spin-off franchises, including 4 anime adaptations in 2017, a Korean ripoff facilitated by Kim Jong-il, and a multitude of references in other shows. Today, Godzilla is set to return to theaters in 2019 with a rematch with his sworn enemy, King Ghidorah. Even after 65 years, the people's love for Godzilla lives on and will continue to live on for future generations to enjoy. Although the tragic and radioactive waters of its origin have been largely obscured, Gojira has risen as a triumph of soft power, bringing people around the world together through destruction.